July 14, 1962, 11:37 p.m., 3 NYPD officers crawled out of Small's Paradise on their hands and knees, not because they were drunk, not because they'd been beaten, because Bumpy Johnson had given them a choice: crawl out with your dignity in pieces or get carried out with your career in pieces. 200 witnesses watched in complete silence as officers Murphy, Kowalski, and Henderson crawled across the floor, through the doorway, down the steps, and onto 135th Street. One of them was crying. When they finally reached the sidewalk and stood up, their sergeant was waiting. He took one look at them and asked what happened. Officer Murphy, still shaking, said 5 words that would change NYPD policy forever. "We disrespected the wrong man." This is the story of Table 12. The night 3 cops learned that a badge doesn't protect you from consequences, only character does. To understand what happened on July 14, 1962, you need to understand what it meant to be a black man in New York in 1962. The civil rights movement was exploding. Sit-ins, freedom rides, Birmingham. The country was changing, but the NYPD wasn't. Harlem was still occupied territory. Cops didn't patrol Harlem, they terrorized it. Random stop and frisks, beatings in back alleys, arrest without cause, and the language, the casual, vicious racism that spilled out of police mouths like it was part of their training. Calling grown men boy, calling women worse, using the N-word like punctuation. Most black men in Harlem had learned to swallow it. Keep your head down, say yes sir even when you wanted to scream. Survive another day. But Bumpy Johnson had never been most men, and on the night of July 14th, 3 NYPD officers were about to learn that the hard way. July 14, 1962, 9:15 p.m., Small's Paradise was packed. Saturday night in Harlem meant music, food, and freedom. The jazz quartet was swinging. Tables were full. Laughter and conversation filled the air. Bumpy Johnson was at his usual spot, table 7 in the back corner. With him, his wife May, dressed in a beautiful green dress she'd been excited to wear all week. This was supposed to be a quiet evening, dinner, music, a break from the streets. At table 12, 3 NYPD officers sat down, officers Patrick Murphy, Stanley Kowalski, and James Henderson, all white, all in their late 30s, all off-duty but still wearing the arrogance that came with the badge. They ordered steaks and whiskey, got loud fast, started making comments about the women in the room, crude comments, the kind that made people uncomfortable but nobody said anything because they were cops. At 10:30 p.m., Bumpy Johnson got up to use the restroom. She had to walk past table 12. As she passed, Officer Kowalski said something, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Now that's a fine piece for a Naynar's wife. The room went silent. The jazz band missed a note. Every conversation stopped. Bumpy froze mid-step. Her face went blank. Not angry, just blank. The blankness of a woman who'd heard that word too many times in her life and was tired of pretending it didn't cut her. She turned slowly, looked at Kowalski. "Excuse me?" Kowalski smiled, thought it was funny. "You heard me, sweetheart. Your man's a lucky Naynar." His partners laughed. Murphy slapped the table. "Stan, you're gonna get us in trouble." Kowalski waved him off. Trouble? From who? These people know their place. What Kowalski didn't know, what all 3 of them didn't know, was that Bumpy Johnson had just stood up from table 7. Slowly, deliberately. Every eye in Small's Paradise turned to watch, because everyone in that room knew what was about to happen, except the cops. Bumpy walked across the restaurant. His footsteps were the only sound. When he reached table 12, he didn't yell, didn't threaten, just looked at Kowalski and spoke in a voice so calm it was terrifying. "Apologize to my wife." Kowalski looked up. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He knew who Bumpy was. Every cop in Harlem knew. But he was drunk and arrogant and wearing a badge, so he made the worst decision of his life. "Or what, boy?" Bumpy's expression didn't change. "Apologize now." Murphy, the smarter of the 3, sensed danger. "Stan, just apologize, let's go." But Kowalski was committed now, had to save face in front of his buddies. He stood up, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. "I don't apologize to Ndars, and I sure as hell don't take orders from them." Bumpy nodded slowly, like he'd just confirmed something he already knew. Then he turned to the band leader. "Stop playing." The music died. Bumpy turned to the entire restaurant. "Everyone stays. Nobody leaves. What happens next? You're all witnesses." He looked back at Kowalski. "Last chance. Apologize to my wife. Walk out of here with your dignity intact." Henderson, the third cop, laughed nervously. "You threatening police officers? That's a felony, Johnson." Bumpy didn't even look at him. "I'm giving you a choice. Something you never give us." Kowalski reached for his belt, for the gun he wasn't supposed to be carrying while off duty. His fingers touched the grip. That's when Bumpy moved. Not fast, not slow, just precise. He grabbed Kowalski's wrist, twisted. The gun clattered to the floor. Bumpy kicked it away. Then he did something nobody expected. He didn't hit Kowalski, didn't throw a punch, just held his wrist, tight enough that Kowalski's face went pale. "You reach for a gun in a room full of black people and you think we're the threat?" Bumpy's voice was still calm, still controlled. "You come into our neighborhood, eat our food, drink our whiskey, and you disrespect our women with that word. Your word, the word you created to dehumanize us, and then you reach for a gun when we ask for basic respect." Murphy stood up. "Johnson, let him go. We're police officers. You're assaulting." Bumpy turned his head. Just his head. "Sit down, Officer Murphy. Before I forget you're here." Murphy sat down, because in that moment, Bumpy Johnson's presence filled the entire room. This wasn't a gangster. This was a king in his kingdom, and the cops had just violated sacred law. Bumpy released Kowalski's wrist, stepped back. "Here's what's going to happen. You three are going to stand up, walk to that door. But you're not walking like men, because you didn't act like men. You acted like cowards, so you're going to crawl on your hands and knees through this restaurant, past every person you disrespected just by being here. And when you get to the street, you're going to remember this night for the rest of your lives." Henderson jumped up. "You're insane. We're not." Bumpy raised his hand. Not threatening, just raised it. And from every corner of the restaurant, men stood up. 20 of them, 30. Regular customers, working men, bartenders, musicians, all standing, all watching, all ready. Henderson saw it, saw that he was surrounded by people who'd been waiting for a moment like this. A moment to push back. He sat down. Kowalski's face was red. "I'll have your ass arrested. You'll do nothing," Bumpy interrupted, "because if you don't crawl out of here right now, I'm going to make a phone call. And tomorrow morning, every precinct captain in this city will receive a file, photos of you three taking bribes from the Irish mob on the west side, photos of you shaking down black businesses, photos of you planting evidence. I've been collecting them for 3 years, so you have a choice. Crawl out now, keep your jobs, and never set foot in Harlem again, or refuse and I bury you." Murphy's face went white, because Bumpy wasn't bluffing. They'd been sloppy. They'd taken money from the wrong people, and Bumpy had eyes everywhere. "He's bluffing," Kowalski said, but his voice shook. Bumpy walked to the bar, picked up the phone, started dialing. "Internal affairs. Let's find out." "Wait," Murphy shouted. He looked at his partners, looked at the crowd, looked at the exit that suddenly seemed a million miles away. Then he got down on his knees. "Stan, Jim, we don't have a choice." Kowalski stared at him. "You're seriously, get on your knees." Murphy's voice cracked. "Now." One by one they dropped. First Murphy, then Henderson, finally Kowalski, tears of humiliation streaming down his face. "Start crawling," Bumpy said quietly. And they did, hands and knees on the wooden floor, past table 12, past table 11. People moved their chairs to give them room. Nobody said a word. The only sound was the scrape of knees on wood, the ragged breathing of 3 grown men reduced to crawling like children. At table 8, Mrs. Eleanor Washington, a 67-year-old woman who'd been called the N-word by police more times than she could count, stood up as they passed, looked down at them, didn't say anything. Just looked. They couldn't meet her eyes. At table 5, a young couple, both college students at CCNY, watched in stunned silence. The young man whispered to his girlfriend, "This is what dignity looks like." When the cops reached the door, Bumpy called out, "Officers." They stopped, didn't look back. "The next time you think about using that word, remember how this floor felt under your knees. Remember that every person in this room is someone's wife, someone's husband, someone's parent. Remember that respect isn't given by a badge, it's earned by behavior." They crawled through the doorway, down the 3 steps to the sidewalk. When they finally reached the street and stood up, their sergeant, Michael O'Reilly, was leaning against a patrol car. He'd gotten a call, anonymous tip that something was happening at Small's Paradise. He'd expected a fight, maybe a shooting. What he saw instead were 3 of his officers, Uniforms dirty, faces tear-streaked, crawling out of a jazz club. What the hell happened in there? O'Reilly demanded. Murphy looked at him, looked back at the doorway where Bumpy Johnson stood, silhouetted by the warm light of the restaurant. We learned a lesson, Sarge. We learned that there are lines you don't cross, even with a badge. July 15, 1962. The next morning, Sergeant O'Reilly filed a report. Not against Bumpy, against his own officers. Conduct unbecoming, public intoxication while armed, use of racial slurs against civilians. The report sat on the desk of Captain Ronald Hayes, 28th Precinct. Hayes read it again. Then he did something unusual. He called Bumpy Johnson, asked to meet, neutral ground. July 17, 1962. They met at a diner on 125th Street. Hayes came alone, no badge visible. Just a man in a suit. Bumpy sat across from him. Hayes spoke first. What happened at Small's Paradise? That can't happen again. Bumpy sipped his coffee. Then tell your men to stop disrespecting our community. Hayes nodded slowly. Fair. But making cops crawl, Johnson. That's a line. So is calling my wife the N-word. So is carrying a gun while drunk. So is 3 decades of police brutality in Harlem. Where do you want to draw the line, Captain? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. What do you want? Bumpy leaned forward. Training? Mandatory training for every officer assigned to Harlem. Cultural sensitivity. Racial awareness. I don't care what you call it, but teach them that we're human beings. Teach them that the badge doesn't give them the right to terrorize us. And fire Murphy, Kowalski, and Henderson. Not suspension. Fired. Make them examples. I can't fire them. Union won't allow it. Then transfer them. Far from Harlem. Staten Island. Queens. I don't care, but they don't work in my neighborhood ever again. Hayes considered it. And if I do this, then the photos I have stay buried. And the next time there's an incident between your officers and Harlem residents, I'll call you first before I handle it myself. Hayes extended his hand. Bumpy shook it. Within a week, all 3 officers were transferred. Murphy to Staten Island, Kowalski to Brooklyn, Henderson to Queens. None ever worked in Harlem again. And in September 1962, the NYPD launched a pilot program. Community relations training, mandatory for all officers assigned to predominantly black neighborhoods. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't enough, but it was a start, and it happened because Bumpy Johnson made 3 cops crawl. The story of Table 12 spread through Harlem like wildfire. People who weren't there swore they were. The details grew with each retelling. Some said Bumpy made them crawl for an hour. Some said he made them apologize to every table. But the core truth remained. For the first time in memory, police officers had been held accountable, not by the system, by the community. Years later, in 1967, a young activist named Marcus Johnson, no relation to Bumpy, was organizing protests against police brutality. He went to Bumpy for advice. Bumpy told him about Table 12. You want to know how to fight power? You don't just fight the people. You fight the system that protects them. Those cops crawled because I had leverage. Information, proof. Anger alone isn't enough. You need strategy. Marcus took that lesson, used it, helped organize some of the most effective police accountability protests of the late 60s. If this story of dignity, justice, and the night one man made police crawl for respect inspired you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you believe accountability doesn't come from the system, it comes from the community demanding it. Share this with someone who needs to know that standing up to power isn't about violence, it's about leverage and courage. What would you have done if you were at Table 12 that night? Let me know in the comments.